Her brand was kindness. Her reality was cruelty. To her million followers, she was Serafina, the self-made guru of authentic living, a beacon of empowerment who preached a gospel of toxic positivity from her pristine, all-white mansion. To me, for 2 soul-crushing years, she was my boss. My job title was personal assistant. That was the lie we told the world. My real job was personal everything. I was her scheduler, her travel agent, her social media manager, her therapist, her chef, her scapegoat, and in the end, the ghostwriter of the very soul she claimed was her own. I was the architect of her authenticity, and when she decided I was disposable, she forgot one crucial detail. An architect always keeps the blueprints. It started like a dream. I was 24, a recent literature graduate with a head full of romantic ideas about writing and a bank account full of moths. The posting was a needle in the haystack, personal assistant to a high-profile author and influencer. I sent in my resume on a whim. I never thought I'd hear back. But I did. Serafina was even more dazzling in person than she was through a filter. She was all wide smiles, warm hugs, and inspirational quotes. She told me she saw a spark in me. She says she didn't just want an assistant, she wanted a creative partner. I was completely starstruck. I accepted the job on the spot. The first 6 months were a blur of impossible tasks disguised as exciting challenges. The reality of her life was a chaotic, frantic scramble, completely at odds with the serene, mindful persona she projected online. I quickly learned that her authenticity was the most manufactured product of all. I remember one night. It was 3:17 a.m. My phone buzzed on my nightstand, a furious, insistent vibration. It was her. The text was a string of all-caps emergencies. "Emma, I need the green smoothie, the one from that place in Silver Lake, now." That place in Silver Lake closed at 9 p.m. We lived in Malibu. It was a 45-minute drive one way. I texted her back, my hands shaking. "Serafina, they're closed. I can try to make one for you?" Her reply was instant. "No, I need that one. My aura is off. Figure it out." Figure it out was her mantra. It was her answer for everything, from a double-booked flight to a bad review. So I figured it out. I found the cafe's menu online. I spent the next hour driving to 3 different all-night grocery stores, hunting down the impossible ingredients: organic Peruvian maca powder, hand-harvested spirulina, and a specific brand of Icelandic spring water. I got back to her mansion just before sunrise, blended the concoction, and left it on a silver tray outside her bedroom door. I never got a thank you. The next morning, she complained it was too pulpy. My life ceased to be my own. It became an endless series of her emergencies. But the biggest project, the one that would consume me completely, was the book. Her memoir. It was meant to be her magnum opus, the codification of her entire brand. The working title was Unfiltered: My Journey to Radical Authenticity. She called me into her pristine, all-white office. "Emma," she said, her expression grave and important, "this book, it has to be my soul on the page. I need you to help me find the words." What followed were months of what she called interview sessions. I would sit with my laptop, a recorder between us, and I would ask her about her life, her struggles, her triumphs. The problem was she didn't have any. Her stories were a collection of shallow, self-serving anecdotes. A tough breakup was reframed as a journey of self-discovery. A failed business venture was an opportunity for growth. It was all brand safe, inspirational jargon, utterly devoid of a human pulse. After one particularly useless session, where her biggest trauma was a bad haircut in college, she sighed and waved a dismissive hand. She said, "Look, you're the writer. Just make something up, something that sounds deep. These people will believe anything." And so I did. But I didn't make it up. I started to pour myself into the pages. My own life, my own pain, my own hard-won triumphs. The chapter on overcoming debilitating anxiety, that was my story of moving to a new city, broke and alone, and fighting off panic attacks on the subway. The heart-wrenching chapter on grief, that was about the slow, painful process of losing my father to cancer when I was 19, not, as she had suggested, the time her pet hamster died. The chapter on finding self-worth after a toxic relationship, that was mine. Every raw, honest, vulnerable word. I became her ghost, and she was haunting my life. And I kept my journal. It was a habit I had from my first internship. My old boss had told me, document everything, not to tattle, but to protect yourself. I thought it was for performance reviews. With Serafina, I quickly realized it was for survival. Every unhinged text, every impossible demand, every verbally abusive tirade, it all went into a series of neat black moleskin notebooks with complete dates and direct quotes. It wasn't a diary. It was an evidence locker. The book was a phenomenon. It debuted at #1 on the bestseller list. The reviews were rapturous. A masterpiece of raw vulnerability, one critic wrote. Serafina bears her soul in a way that will change lives. My soul. My life. Serafina's fame exploded. She was on every morning show, every podcast, her face on the cover of magazines. I watched, a knot in my stomach, as she tearfully recounted stories on national television that had happened to me, passing them off as her own profound experiences. And then came the Social Media Icon of the Year awards. It was the biggest night of her career, a validation of her entire empire. The week leading up to it was a hurricane of stress, and she was the eye of the storm. I worked for 3 days straight, without sleep, coordinating her dress fittings, her glam squad, her travel arrangements. I was a walking zombie, fueled by caffeine and fear. The day of the ceremony, we were in her lavish hotel suite. It was a flurry of activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, publicists, all orbiting around her like planets around a volatile sun. My job, at that moment, was to ensure her every whim was met. Her final demand before she left for the red carpet was for a bottle of sparkling water. Voss, she had texted me an hour earlier, glass bottle, chilled to exactly 42 degrees, do not get it wrong. I had gotten the Voss. I had used a digital thermometer. I presented it to her on a silver tray. She picked it up, looked at the label, and her face twisted into a mask of pure, theatrical rage. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. It's the Voss water you asked for," I stammered. "This," she said, holding it up like it was a vial of poison, "is the 375-milliliter bottle? I asked for the 500-milliliter bottle. Are you an idiot? Do you have rocks in your head? Is your one job that difficult?" The entire room went silent. The glam squad froze, their brushes and combs hovering in midair. They stared at their shoes, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. I stood there, speechless. The absurdity of it was breathtaking. I started, but she cut me off. Her voice rose to a full-blown scream. The carefully crafted mask of kindness completely gone, revealing the ugly, narcissistic monster beneath. Do you know how much I pay you to do simple, menial tasks that a trained monkey could do? And you can't even get the water right? You are useless. Utterly, completely useless. She took a step closer, her face inches from mine, and then she delivered the words that would set me free. "Get out," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're fired. Get out of my sight. You are nothing. You were lucky to even be in my orbit." And then she threw the bottle of water at me. It didn't hit me, but it shattered against the wall behind me, spraying glass and overpriced spring water across the plush carpet. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I just looked her in the eye, and for the first time, I saw her for what she really was. A small, insecure woman in a very expensive dress. "Okay," I said, my voice even. I turned and walked out of the room. I could feel the pitying eyes of the glam squad on my back. I walked through the hotel lobby, past the beautiful people and the flashing lights, and out into the cool evening air. The weight of her world, the world I had been carrying on my shoulders for 2 years, was gone. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was free. I went home to my small apartment, a place that suddenly felt entirely my own. I didn't mourn the loss of my job. I celebrated my liberation from my jailer. That night, I ordered a pizza, opened a bottle of cheap wine, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't check my phone every 30 seconds. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. She had called me nothing. She had tried to erase me, but she had forgotten one thing. I was a writer, and a writer always has the last word. I pulled out the journals, the neat black moleskin notebooks, my evidence locker. I spent the next week not looking for a new job, but building my case. I wasn't going to leak some petty gossip to a tabloid. That was her world, a world of whispers and innuendo. My revenge would be in my world, a world of facts, evidence, and clear, articulate prose. I chose my platform carefully. Not a shady blog, but Medium. A place for thoughtful, long-form journalism. A place where my words would have weight and credibility. I started to write. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't a screed. It was a calm, methodical, and devastatingly factual exposé. I laid out the timeline of my employment. I described the toxic work environment not with emotional adjectives, but with her own words, her own abusive text messages, which I embedded as clean, undeniable screenshots. I detailed the impossible demands, the verbal abuse, the public humiliations, and then I got to the heart of it all, the book. I created a side-by-side comparison. On one side, a transcript of her shallow, rambling interview answers. On the other, the deeply personal, vulnerable prose that had made it into the final manuscript. I showed with irrefutable clarity how my life, my trauma, my soul had become her bestseller. The final piece was the title. It had to be perfect. Not angry, but ironic. Not petty, but powerful. I typed it out, and I knew it was right. I was fired by an empowerment icon. Here's what empowerment looks like behind the scenes. I read the entire article one last time. It was a declaration of independence. It was my truth backed by her lies. My hand hovered over the mouse. It was a single click, a quiet, final act of rebellion that would be heard around the world. I clicked publish. For the first few hours, there was silence. I watched the view count on the article tick up slowly. 10, 50, 100. I started to wonder if I had made a mistake. Maybe no one would care. And then the storm broke. Someone with a huge following on Twitter shared it. Then another. Then a major journalist. The view count didn't just climb, it exploded. 10,000, 100,000, a million. Hashtag Serafina is over started trending. My story wasn't just a story anymore, it was a reckoning. The fallout was swift and brutal. The article was a torpedo that hit her brand squarely amidships, and the whole thing sank in a matter of days. Her comment sections, once a sea of heart emojis and praise, became a flood of anger and disgust. Her sponsors, the ones who had paid her millions to represent their brands of wellness and authenticity, began to drop her. I watched, with a kind of detached fascination, as their corporate Twitter accounts issued terse, carefully worded statements. In light of recent information, we have decided to suspend our partnership with Serafina. Her talent agency, the one that had hailed her as a once-in-a-generation voice, let her go. Her publisher announced they are putting all future projects, including the paperback release of her fraudulent memoir, under review. Her carefully constructed empire, the one built on my labor and my life, crumbled to dust. But the most incredible part wasn't watching her fall. It was the messages that started flooding my own inbox. They came from other former assistants, from interns, from makeup artists, from photographers, dozens of them, each one with their own story of her abuse, their own tale of exploitation. They thanked me for speaking out, for giving them a voice, for finally telling the truth they were all too scared to tell. I hadn't just gotten revenge for myself. I had sparked a small revolution. A week after the article went live, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman with a crisp, professional voice. "Is this Emma Jennings? My name is Sarah Chen. I am a senior editor at Penguin Random House. I read your article on Medium. It was extraordinary. We think you have a powerful voice, and we're wondering if you've ever considered writing a book." She wasn't asking for more gossip. She wasn't interested in a tell-all about Serafina. "She thinks," she said, her voice warm with excitement, "that there is a real need for a book about navigating toxic workplaces, a guide for young professionals, from someone who has been through the fire and come out the other side." I'm sitting in a coffee shop right now, working on the outline for that book, my book. The advance they gave me was more than I made in 2 years of being Serafina's ghost. She told me I was nothing without her, that I was lucky to be in her orbit. But a ghost is only invisible until it decides to speak, and once it does, it can haunt you forever. I used to write her story. Now, I'm finally writing my own.